South Koreans. That was to be a temporary line, which became a permanent line as we know today. Now, the Japanese surrendered on August 14th. When the Japanese surrendered, the Koreans on the peninsula celebrated everywhere. Because remember, the Japanese had dominated them since 1905. 40 years of domination where they couldn't speak Korean, they couldn't dress Korean, they could not enjoy Korean customs, and they worked basically for Japanese companies. And much of them worked for the Japanese war industry. So there were these celebrations, and then the celebrations quickly led to organizing. Organizing throughout the peninsula of Korea, both north of the 17th parallel and south of the 17th parallel, where there were now Russian troops. Actually, the Russian troops were there because they had come in on August 8th. The U.S. troops were not there yet. The U.S. troops did not get there till September 8th. But to the great credit of the Korean people, on August 6th, they created their new democratic country of Korea. They had organized from Pyongyang in the north to Busan and Gwangju and throughout the peninsula, excuse me, in these committees, which all came together in Seoul on September 6th to announce the formation of their new free country of Korea. Now, 4 days earlier, Ho Chi Minh had announced the independence of Vietnam on September 2nd, 1945. Again, the Japanese had surrendered. The Japanese were no longer in control. Well, the crimes that are not addressed now begin. The crimes of the 20th century that have still not been addressed. We had U.S. intelligence that showed that the Korean people were excited and ready to govern themselves. However, now that we were in the post-World War II period, it was very important that the United States assert its own economic hegemony around the world in opposition to what was still perceived as a threatening socialist ideology that had originated with the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917. Even though Russia was severely wounded from World War II as well as World War I, it hadn't even recovered from World War I yet. And our own intelligence also showed that the Soviets had no monolithic plan to take over the world. They did want a buffer zone on their western flank because they had been invaded 4 times in the 20th century from their western flank, by the Germans in 1914, by the Poles in 1920, by the Germans again in 1941, and what was the other one? The 14 Western nations that intervened in the Civil War in Russia in 1918 to 1920, including the United States, that sent 13,000 troops in to crush the Bolshevik Revolution. So they lost 1 out of every 7 of their citizens in World War II, and they had all this history of being threatened from the West, from their western flank. And so they did want what we called Eastern Europe, or the Iron Curtain, as protection on their western flank. And we knew that. Our government knew that was their intention, and their intention didn't go beyond that. They didn't even have resources or energy to go beyond that. They were trying to survive. But nonetheless, we knew now that we, as a country, the United States, needed to make capitalism the model for the world. And Korea was going to be one of the very first case studies where we had to be successful. And so that meant that this new Korean Republic that had been created in September 6, 1945, had to be repressed. And so from that point on, then U.S. troops arrived September 8th. 75,000 of them. That has now led to basically an occupation by the United States military since 1945 to the present. Now, in the meantime, between 1945 and 1950, there was the emergence of a guerrilla war in South Korea, South and Korea along the DMZ, because the DMZ being roughly the 17th parallel. We brought to Korea to be our puppet leader a man named Syngman Rhee, a Korean who had left Korea early in the century because he actually did not want to be under the persecution of the Japanese. But he was a Methodist, and Koreans for the most part are not Methodists. They have a variety of historic religious beliefs, none of which would be considered, for the most part, Protestant or Catholic or Christian. So we brought Syngman Rhee on General MacArthur's plane in October of 1945 from the United States to be our titular leader, like similarly what we did in 1954 in bringing Diem from New Jersey to Vietnam to be our titular Catholic leader of a country in Vietnam that was clearly Buddhist, predominantly Buddhist. And we set up the Republic of Korean Army and secret police, versions of secret police, and we continually put down these efforts by the Koreans to assert their new independence. We made labor unions illegal. We completely made illegal the new government. We created the United States Army military government of Korea. And by 1947 and 48, a real armed guerrilla war had emerged against the U.S. occupiers. And we were building up Syngman Rhee's army, the Republic of Korea, the ROC, and their police forces, and their paramilitaries. They had a lot of paramilitary units. And so the Korean people, 95% of whom wanted to be free, did not have an opportunity to develop their autonomy as a nation. And so what we did was, in those 5 years, we worked with the Koreans that had collaborated with the Japanese, and basically recreated the Korean police forces that had worked with the Japanese, the collaborators as we would call them, and some of the Japanese administrators were retained. So basically we supported the 5 to 8% of the oligarchic feudal structure of Korea that had been able to survive under Japanese domination because they were able to retain their feudal positions with the Japanese. So basically, we supported a continuation of the same version of Japanese colonialism that had been present since 1905, only we had more Koreans that we were recruiting at gunpoint, basically, or with lots of pressure to be part of the administration of the new Korea, the new democratic Korea. And we did have elections in 1948, meaning we, the United States, orchestrated with Syngman Rhee elections that to most Koreans was so unfair they didn't participate in the elections.